So thanks everyone for staying this long. So first, a reminder, please fill out your feedback session. One more. Also, some people have complained about the air conditioning, so we've opened those doors for you. Hopefully that'll make everything a lot cooler. And then I'm going to hand over to Wagner.
Hello everyone.
Hello.
Can you guys hear me okay, or do you need a mic? No, right? Everyone can hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah?
We're right in front of you.
Show of hands if you cannot hear me. Good. So you can come closer.
There's something wrong with that logic.
No, it's not. I was just to actually try.
Okay.
Right. So we're going to be doing an introduction of Azure Integration Services, right? Kind of a bit different from what you guys see that every day do on development. But what I find out is like more and more, some of the technologies that we're going to be talking here is being used either in conjunction with the other parts of the development or as mainstream development. And let's see if that's working. It is. So my name is Wagner. I'm the Principal Integration Architect at Tita and also a Microsoft Azure MVP, right? I've been working with integration for, I can't remember how long. Since the old times of Christoph, sorry. And when we might starting to find some of the technologies that we have around integration on Azure, I jump on that and starting to work. Today I'm working with a bit of Azure integration, but also the cloud solutions in general. I know that digital transformation is a really, really loaded term, right? But there's no place that you're going today that are not going to be hearing that. The idea, from my point of view, of the digital transformation is actually engage more your customers in order to get information to transform your products, right? With that, you're going to be optimizing the operations. You're going to improving what you're doing in an application. And if you start to do that, then your employers are going to be empowered to have more time to do innovation, right? So thinking from a technical point of view. If you engage better with your customers, you know exactly what they want. You try to improve your products in a way that is going to be faster to build, but also faster or easier for them to use. So with that, you're going to be optimizing your operations from a business point of view, but also from development point of view. That's where like those things coming together from using that same idea on development. That's where you get the DevOps point, right? And with that, you're going to have more time to work faster and better. Why are we talking about the digital transformation today? Man, it's really hard to see better. Because today, business depends on all kinds of applications, right? But actually depending on all kinds of mission-critical applications. And you guys being developing or maintaining some of them, right? Like in your companies. Then, because of that, especially if you're working on support as well, you know that although value is seen when the application is running okay, value is lost when those applications cannot integrate with each other, cannot talk to each other. So we're trying to find better ways to make sure that those components work together. How many people here are actually having to maintain one system or develop one system, and that system works in isolation? It doesn't need to talk to anything else. No one, right? So everyone, it doesn't matter if it's your bespoke application, if it is something that you're buying off the shelf to implement in your company, you have to integrate with other things. And that's why that you see today that application integration is the backbone of that digital transformation. If you make sure that that integration that usually, or most of the time in the past, was kind of a nightmare and was given to the guy in the basement eating pizza and warm coke, yeah, guys like me, right? So if you're starting to enable everyone to do that integration easier, then you're going to have that optimization, that empowerment of all the employers, and starting to work on that side. Okay. Some of the integration scenarios that you might have seen. Application to application is the easiest one to get it right. So like you get one application or a client application talking to the server, that's already integration. In a way, you're going to be probably talking about APIs there, but you might need from that backend application talk to another applications and things like that. Business to business, which is I think is more the core integration realm, when you get in like a company one needed to talk to company two, and you need to make sure that those two things are talking together nicely, right? The idea of SaaS applications. Now, how many people today, or every time that we're seeing someone evaluating how they're going to create the next piece on the business, what they do first? Take a look at what they have off the shelf, how easy it is to customize, integrate that with something else. And if don't have that available, then that's when you're going to start creating bespoke, right? So you already have an application, and someone else needs to bring something new or another part of that, another application to improve or to expand the business. What's going to happen? You're going to get something off the shelf, and now you have to integrate with your legacy of your existing things. So integration again. And IoT is another one that is like is starting to appear more and more, right? So field service systems that is sending information that you need to capture and act on top of that, right? Like tracking your message or your package, making sure that it goes all the way to the client. And if you have all those other scenarios, what are the challenges that we see? First one, interfaces and API. So if you're talking about a whole lot of different systems with a whole lot of different languages, a whole lot of different protocols, what that means? A whole lot of interfaces and APIs that I have to learn, right? Would be better if maybe I have like a centralized way to play with that, like just one place to understand those things. Data sources and formats. So again, the more things that you have, the more the databases are going to be different, the data sources are going to be different, the formats are going to be different. That means that you have to find an easy way to translate those things across the pipe, right? The systems today are more and more distributed, even more from the old times of SOA, right? Because now everything is in the cloud, everything is everywhere. And we're not going to get rid of the on-premises, right? For lots of reasons. That means that another thing that you have to worry about, and that's one challenge of integration today, is how do I make sure that stuff that is on-prem talks nicely to stuff that is in the cloud, and vice versa. Because on-prem to the cloud is kind of easy, right? But you also need to bring it back, and that's when you're starting to have some trouble. So what you need for that? You need some kind of platform that makes sure that all those challenges and all those scenarios can live well together. Gartner coined that thing, integration platform as a service. Actually, make it even better and call it enterprise integration platform as a service. It's a mouthful, right? It's like a lot of things to say. So that's why, although it's nothing related to Apple, that's what people is calling iPads. We're not going to buy that in a box, in a shiny white or gold, but it's something that we're using a lot, right? What is this integration platform as a service trying to give you? One is embrace that API economy that we were talking before, like making sure that instead of being afraid of that many interfaces and APIs, you actually use that in your favor to speed up the integration, right? Make something that is quite flexible, that you don't have to go through a whole lot of hoops to connect to systems, to translate from one system to another. Connect to SaaS, to on-prem, and to cloud easily, right? So to overcome that challenge of the on-prem to the cloud, but also to make sure that adopting SaaS applications is simpler. Like one of the examples that we have there was the Salesforce. The Salesforce API, if you just coding with that, you would take a lot of time to one, learn the SDK, two, making sure that you have the credentials right, three, making sure that you connect everything together, right? Would be better if you say, here is a connector, this connector can do those things, here are my credentials, you deal with what is the APIs that I needed to connect to Salesforce and come back and say, yes, you connected, now start to actually do stuff. So that's the idea of having a simple way to connect, right? And all of those things together, again, enable that digital transformation, that agility and making sure that you improving your product for your client and making more time for yourself to continue innovating. Components that I think probably would require, based on what we just talked, one, we need some kind of API, something to deal with those APIs, right? Either to create APIs, either to create APIs, either to manage how those APIs have been used. We need something to allow you to run workflows, to run business processes. Because today, what we do with business process, we code all the business processes, right? We write the functions, we string them together, and we have something on top trying to put all of those things together. The idea here is that the workflow that string those API calls, all those business functions together, is something that is faster to implement. Then you spend more time worrying about the actual business logic at the core, and then string them together easily enough, right? Messages, and making sure that messages are reliable, that it can be replayed, that you have a guaranteed delivery, and that you don't duplicate and all that kind of stuff, is also quite important when you're working on those big distributed systems. And finally, something that is not necessarily new, but is being used more and more, is the idea of an event-based platform or event, a reactive programming, right? By now, you probably recognize pretty much all those icons, right? Which means that Microsoft has one component for each one of them. So you have APIs, you have workflows, you have messages, you have events, and you have API management for APIs, you have logic apps for workflows, you have service bus for event grid for the reliable messaging, and you have event grid for events, right? If I would recreate that thing, I would be putting like Azure functions, just picking the head on the side, because although it's not officially part of the AIS family, the Azure Integration Services family, Azure Functions are that kind of cousin that actually comes to all the parties that is like having lunch with you every day. They are pretty much part of the family, right? So on the toolbox today for everyone that is working with integration is those four things plus Azure Functions from an Azure point of view. And that's what Microsoft calling Azure Integration Services, right? The idea here is that instead of being a package that you have to buy, you don't go to Azure and say, hey, instantiate a standard version of Azure Integration Services. You're not going to be doing that, right? There is no product called Azure Integration Services. It's more like a way to say, when you're talking about this block of the integration components that you need to use, sometimes together, sometimes by themselves, you have a collective name of Azure Integration Services, right? And that is actually one of the big advantages of the Microsoft offering versus a lot of the competition. Because in here, you use all those services on your terms, right? You select, I only want to use API management, it's fine. You're using Azure Integration Services. I only want to use logic apps, that's okay. You're still using Azure Integration Services. And when I need to bring those two together, they guarantee that they're really easy to play together, right? So what is the idea behind Azure Integration Services? Connect applications in your business really easily, right? Connect applications between business really easily. and connect application services to facilitate that innovation that we're talking about. Instead of having to write a lot of code to test if something is working fine, you can kind of use the idea of coding blocks or configuration over code to create a prototype really quickly and to see if things work. But with something that is actually can carry to production if you need to, instead of just as a playground. So from here, we're going to talk about each one of the components quickly. Then I'll show you the labs that we want to do, and after that, you guys are going to be play with that and become integrators as well. So, first one on our list is the Azure API management, right? The idea of Azure API management is something that is going to be able to publish APIs safely and under your control. So when I say that I'm going to use API management, I'm going to be writing the code inside API management. Yes or no? Does anyone know? David knows, but he's shy. So the idea of API management is actually being kind of a proxy between your clients and the APIs that you'll be creating, right? How many times you starting writing some part of your API on a piece of code, and then later on you move to another piece of code, and then you have to go bring that bit to the other one. So in the end, you're giving two endpoints to the client because you couldn't like push those things together, right? So that one was solved, but then now we're working with REST, and that's REST with .NET Framework, and now we have .NET Core, and then you have JavaScript. But all of those things are actually should be your API, right? Would it be good to have a place where you centralize all of that and you present one interface to everyone, right? A single interface that you can version, that you can know how well it is being used, that you can know if the things that you wrote 20 years ago is either under stress or no one is actually using. I can safely decommission that on my next version. That's what API management gives to you. Is a way to create, publish, and manage your API. So you understand exactly what's happening with that, and you can version, secure in a central location. It also gives the advantage to the client to know exactly how to use your APIs because it auto-generates sample codes and have a central location for you to go and discover your APIs. Because that's the other problem. If I have like those 5 APIs that we're talking about, right? 5 different ways to do it. How do I explain to my client or to my developers, right, how to use that? Kind of a nightmare, right? That's what API management is kind of the answer for that nightmare. All good on that one? Go. By the way, API management is kind of a topic by itself. There's a lot of stuff to take out of that. So I was discussing with Daniel to maybe have a session about API management at sometime this year. Azure Logic Apps. The idea of Azure Logic Apps is actually create those business processes that we're talking about, right? In a way that is, one, visual and fast to implement, but also scalable and easy to maintain and monitor. Okay? So instead of you having to write code for that, it's the idea of connecting APIs together with some kind of logic in the middle. And one of the biggest strengths of Logic Apps is that give you out of the box a set of connectors. So, and when I say a set of connectors, it's a lot of connectors, right? 200 plus and growing. So if you think about a system, chances are that if this system is well known, a Logic Apps connector is going to be there. Salesforce, Dynamics 365, Nav, Business Central, ServiceNow, and it goes on and on, right? So instead of you having to wrap code around to talk to ServiceNow to any one of those systems, we can use Logic Apps to front the piece that do that. Still push your business logic or your validation stuff inside your code, and then after that you just call the Logic Apps to do the backend work. Or depending on how fast you wanted the things to do, put everything inside the logic apps. Service bus. Service bus is probably the oldest, not probably, I think it is the oldest today, the oldest service in Azure, right? And what it does is basically a way for you to manage queues and topics, which means that's like a way for you to guarantee that messages that are received are going to be delivered in order, and that is going to be delivered to the client on its terms. What I mean by that, if I have to do an API call every time that I need to send a message to client A, right? If the client A is down for some reason, either I have to be responsible for storing all those messages and send it back, or the message is going to disappear, right? So message bus is the service that gives you all of that in a box. Send the message to message bus, to message bus, and forget about it. It's going to say the message is here, is going to be here for X amount of time. If you want, just come, connect, pick it up, and do what you want. I'll guarantee that I'll give you the messages in order, and that if you want me, if a duplicated message arrives, I discard it, or do things like that. So that's one of the things that message bus does. So instead of you trying to implement your own queue, there is a queue there ready for you to use. The other thing that is quite interesting in logic apps is, or in service bus, is the idea of I have a message and I have to send to this table and that table, right? Instead of sending to each one of you, I send it to one location and you say, hey, I'm interested on that message. Hey, I'm interested on that message. And then you have a subscription. So automatically it creates a queue for each one of the tables, or a queue for each one of the individuals in the tables if you want to, right? And it might be that says that, like David say, hey, I wanted the messages, but I only wanted the messages about infrastructure. I don't want to know anything about development. So you also can allow the subscriber to define, based on the properties of the message, what type of message, what is the conditions for him to receive a copy of the message, right? That can become quite powerful instead of you having to write all of that. Event grid works in a similar way, but different, right? There is like that's another discussion, like when to use message bus, when to use event grids, when to use the event hubs, all the messaging items. But the idea of event grids is a pub/sub engine on steroids or on scale. So you send a message to event grids, and it's going to publish to everyone that is interested on that. So you just need to come and subscribe. While on service bus, you send a message to the queue, and it's going to guarantee that the people that connect to the queue drains the queue, right? Or send a message to the topic is distributed to the subscriptions, but someone is still responsible, because service bus is mainly used for people that is often disconnected, or when you need that order to be guaranteed, while on event grid says, I'm trying to send messages to you, right? So if you subscribe to me, I'm trying to send a message to you. I'm going to retry for a number of times, but if I receive event 2 and I send it to you and now you just wake up, I send you event 2 maybe before I send event 1. So it doesn't guarantee order, but it guarantees that the message is going to be delivered at most once, while with service bus is going to be at least once. So the idea of the event grids, as I said, is like push message to other people, right? And with that, you can create a whole lot of different scenarios. You can make sure that instead of me having to worry about people that is interested on information that I send, and having to be the caretaker of how I connect to system A or to system B or to system C, I push that out to service to event grids. I get the message and say, hey, something happened with me, right? Maybe my client changed changed these details, or my order changed the status, or an event X happened on my system. Here it goes at the event grid. I don't know who's interested on that, but someone might come be interested on that information. Make sense? So if you get all those components together, right, you come with what Microsoft thinks that is a complete integration platform that give you like all those tools which we saw before in a whole lot of other integration scenarios or and integration technologies. Now applied to the cloud on scale and with a subscription or a pay-as-you-go model, right? So one of the things is going to allow you to talk on-premise into the cloud. Pretty much all those components allow you to bleed into on-prem when you need to, right? It's going to be allow you to get that together with everything else that is in Azure, right? So it's really easy connectivity with Azure, and also going to allow you to talk to a whole lot of software as a services, right? So with that comes that speed or agility that we were talking before to create components or create applications really fast. Then the other thing that we have is Microsoft didn't stop there, right? I'm going to go quickly for that one, but it's something that is quite Daryl probably would be quite excited about. That is the whole Microsoft Power Platform that sits on top of Office 365. So the idea of the Power Platform was to give you, for either the Dynamics on Office 365 users, a way to connect data, connect those systems together and create new applications or extend those applications, right? All of that is sitting on top of Azure. And those three components are Power BI, which is basically the data visualization tool. Power Apps, which is a way to implement applications, visually implement applications, right? And Microsoft Flow, that is a cut down version or a streamlined version of Logic Apps. So if those things inside Office 365, you will be able to do first part integrations and sometimes like bleed into other applications. So if you think about, you have Microsoft Power Platform in one side, we have Azure integration services in the other. And if you get all those things together, if you're working with the first-party Microsoft applications like Dynamics or NAV or Office 365 integration, you should be able to put all those things together, right? So extend the Office 365 or the Dynamics or the Business Central application with the tools that are there, the Power BI, the Power Apps, and the Microsoft Flow. When you need to, you could like bleed into Azure to use everything else that is in Azure, connecting that with Logic Apps, for example. So all of a sudden, instead of you having to, again, cut code when you're doing integration, even with the Office 365, you could also use all of that together. But I spent like probably even more time than I expected talking, right? So the idea is that I'm going to show the lab now, what I'm planning, and in that showing a little bit of those things that we talked about. And after that, is ready for you guys to try that lab as well. Sounds like a plan? Cool. So first things first, let's duplicate that. You're going to find the lab, and the link on my session comes to that page, right? And in here you're going to have a copy of the presentation and also going to have the lab. And what this lab is trying to do is basically just show you a little bit of each one of those technologies, so you can go and provision some of those components, right? You're going to be provisioning using event grids, but not necessarily provisioning a topic. You're going to see that that's like baked into Azure now. So you can use events inside Azure for that. You're going to be provisioning logic apps. And as I said, going to be using our cousin Azure functions. So the scenario that we're going to have here is something more or less like this. Right? You're going to have an image that when it sits on the blob storage, is going to generate an event that triggers a logic app and also triggers a function, right? The webhook thing, I removed that because it was going to be too much for the time that we had. So you're going to create a logic app and a function, connect that to an event that happens on a blob, and then with that, every time that something happens on that one, you're going to receive a notification and a process. So looks simple, but put like a business thing on top of that. A message that maybe is an order arrive on your blob storage, right? With that, you're going to notify someone on the warehouse that a new order arrived, and you're going to have a function that is going to be processing that order and then push to the third-party system. So although this one is just going to get an image and just analyze the image, you could be doing that same thing using a business scenario. So how that works, you're going to be creating a storage account, compute vision, a compute vision API, one logic apps, and one function. Okay, I'll stop on the function a little bit because there is a couple of tricks in here just to make sure that the code that I had that I already tested before was working instead of you guys having some trouble trying to convert that to 2.0 and then you guys not having a lab working. So the first thing that you're going to see is that on that function, I change it to 1.0 just for now, right? And I have instructions there because then I guarantee that the code that I have for 1.0 is working. The other thing that you're going to notice is on the message that we're sending, you're going to be replacing a couple of the information. You're going to have to put your key inside the message. If we had more time, we'll be pushing that to key vault, but for now it's okay. And if you don't create your API on Australia East, make sure that you have the right API endpoint here. And also, one of the steps, you're going to be creating a request bean, right? So you're going to be replacing here. Otherwise, I'm going to receive your notifications instead of you, right? So with that, let's see what this thing does. When you're looking at the logic app, the logic app is connected or is subscribing to events from that storage account that we created, right? So you connecting to receive events from of the type storage account with the resource name this, and only if it's a JPEG. If you send another one, I'm not interested. You could be looking at everything, but that's the only one that I created. And also only looking at block created instead of block deleted, but I could be looking at any event. So those are the things that you can do. And when that happens, it's going to be sending me the whole body of the message to my email. So because of the proof is in the pudding, if I go to my storage account, to a blob storage, and upload an image, it's not me as a kid, it's my kid. So the image has been uploaded, and if that works fine, I should have a message here. There we go. Right, the block created, and all of that. The message was Kid Wagner, blah blah blah. Right, here is the location where we are, so you can actually do stuff with that, and all of this. And if I go to my request pin and take a look, "37 seconds ago," makes sense, right? Yes. So I receive a message that is a person young, a little boy with a frisbee playing, right? So all the information that the Compute Vision API could find. Let's see if it got that right. Yeah. So it's a kid with a thing. I don't know where he find the frisbee, but he said that there's that frisbee here, so kind of do that. I think that might be correct. How did it do that bit? The function that you have, that you're going to be creating, come on, I want to give you time to do stuff. So the function, when it receives that, it sends a message to the custom vision API, get the information back, and then push to that endpoint, right? So similar to, I do some business process, I push to the third party, okay? So the lab, it's in here. You guys can start it now or start later, is up to you. And it kind of step by step. Okay, the code, the sample code, you can find it here. So instead of like copying and paste from the thing that might give you some trouble, it's all here ready for you to play. So one last thing before you guys starting, if you want to learn more about Microsoft Integration Platform, right, there are some links here for the Microsoft Integration Platform as a service, the information about the Gartner Magic Quadrant. They just released 2019, and Microsoft has been again leader on that. Some essentials about how to work with this, and my blog, because I do a lot of I write a lot about those technologies. David.
Is that on your slide deck?
Yes, it's on the slide deck.
Oh, thank you.
And you can find the slide deck in here.
Hi.
Right, so the presentation is here.
Thank you.
It's deep because of it was 27 meg, and GitHub only likes up to 25 meg, so it's not much I could do. Okay, so code away.